This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Mr. Hamilton, how goes your day?
Well, sit in front of the computer, and it's nice outside. I want to be outside. It's weird, like 5 degrees again. It's really weird for Prince George this time of year.
End of January, backside of winter. It's springtime. Sheep start sheep training, getting out in the hills, getting some exercise.
Yeah, not till probably May here because, well, the amount of snow we have on the ground, that makes it a little difficult, and it's not fun. But yeah, definitely on the treadmill and got to put down the bags of chips. Right, that's what happens.
Yeah. So, a couple housekeeping things. Just a reminder: our wild sheep raffles are still for sale. We're going to run them till March 12th, but they are selling out. So, I think I checked this morning. We're at 86% on our Barney Sheep Camp, and we've had a good push on our desert sheep hunt. There's we were down to the last couple hundred tickets on that. So yeah, if you're going to get some tickets on our wild sheep raffles, you need to do it now. We almost always sell out, and I think we'll probably be pretty darn close again this year. So.
Oh, I don't see a problem with the Barneys or the sheep camp or the sheep raffle selling out. Yeah, throw in there. We've got a grizzly bear hunt as well, and you can't get one of those in BC. So that's a great one. We've got the owl-eyed hunt in Texas and the antelope hunt in Alberta. Those are some pretty awesome raffles to go for. So grab your tickets.
Yeah, that owl-eyed hunt is pretty sweet. It's with Roddy McBride, one of the premier outfitters in the business. Daryl Hosker's chipped in. He's going to help pay for some flights, and CITES is going to be done on this thing. So all you need to do is get down there. Everything's going to be taken full. Actually, you don't even have to get down there. We're going to fly you down. This is all inclusive. We fly you down to Texas, out of BC. You do your hunt. You fly home. It's all covered by us. Food, everything. I think you might have to. You got to buy a license, but again, we give you money to pay for that. And then the CITES is covered. So the
hard work is done.
Yeah, Dakota Taxidermy is going to complete the CITES work and ship it back to your place of residence. So yeah, it doesn't get any sweeter than that.
Yeah, like the only thing you'd have to cover is the tip, and that's something that's going to be pretty easy and well worth saving up a little bit of money for that experience. So yeah, that's I want to win that hunt. So
yeah, and then there's a premier pronghorn hunt with Silver Sage outfitters out of Brooks. They kill world-class antelope, and of course, you're not going to get one of those in BC. So yeah, This is a great opportunity. But the best part about it is last year, what was the number for projects on the ground? $318,000.
$318.
So it's these raffles that fund that. So it's a good cause. Okay, February 1st, we got our first webinar series coming up. This is got a trial run for us, but we've had lots of engagement, lots of people. This is a great webinar. We've got Chris Proctor. He's a regional biologist. He is the lead on our Fraser River Bighorn project. This is a flagship project for the Society. We're in year 4 of 9 years. We got another 5 years, 5/6 years ahead of us on this project. Some really good progress being made. Chris is going to give us an update on that. So go to our website. You can get registered for it. It's all over social media. That's probably the best place. You can get registered for the webinar. I'll put a link as well on this site or on this podcast for it. And yeah, come and listen. It's going to be a great.
It's free. It's free, and you get to take part and ask questions about the Fraser River project and how the herds are reacting, or whatever you want to know about it. It's going to be intimate and interactive, we'll call it. Yeah, good time. I want to touch on something. Number four. That was us. Like number 4, Talk is Sheep, number 4 in North America for podcasts. Remember?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you're looking confused.
Well, welcome to my world. Yeah, so thank you to our listeners.
That's huge.
It's very cool. Yeah,
like we were only behind Meat Eater and one of the other big ones, but that was mind blowing. Like that was like, holy crap. So that's all because of the listeners engaging and hitting that follow button, subscribe button, and just taking part and letting us know that they like what they're hearing.
And keep the ideas coming. Like, this show is for you. We didn't really start with a vision. We just knew we wanted to communicate some of the work we're doing, talk about the projects we're involved in and conservation stuff, and add some value there. And thanks to you, yeah, we've grown. We're trying to do a better job. We got lots to learn. We're no Rogan, I'll give you that, but we're super passionate, and we listen to you guys. So you tell us what you want to hear, and we're bringing them to you. And we got some really cool guests coming up. We're really excited. We got 60 coming up. We're trying to get somebody special for that one. And yeah, thank you to everyone for just following along. We love hearing from you. So this is episode 59, and we're joined by Siobhan Darlington. She's currently doing a project around cougars in southern BC. It's through UBC Okanagan. Fantastic project Siobhan's done. She's done some other papers, some really fascinating work, and she's kind of an up-and-comer in the science community in BC, and just an honor to have her on the show. She's doing her PhD work around this cougar study, and we talked to her a little bit about her work in northern Alberta and northern BC around. It was mainly centric around whitetail, but she touches on the caribou work there. So there's some predator-prey concerns around that. We touch on that, and then we talk about her cougar project. A little bit of bighorn stuff, but really it's more general about cougars, and just a really good listen with Siobhan.
Yeah, I think we should do a giveaway again. We should announce the giveaway from the Laura Zara episode. We had
Nathan was the winner on that one.
Yeah, right? That's right. Nathan emailed and said that she has a Malinois, or as I call it, a Maligator. That's 100% correct. So Nathan, hopefully you're listening. Fire us another email at communications@wildsheepsociety.com with your mailing address, and we'll get something cool shipped out to you.
Absolutely. So congrats on that, Nathan. So we're going to do a giveaway here, and you're going to have to listen to the whole podcast. We're not making it easy for you, but you need to tell us, what did you come up with, Steve?
What does Siobhan say her favorite name for a cougar is?
Yeah, that's a good one. So do you have a favorite name? There's 50 names for them. So do you have a favorite?
At least I've always been partial just calling them cougars. Cougars, mountain lions, things like that. I've never really jumped outside that box there. I've never really called them puma or anything else. But yeah, like you said, there's a ton of names that they're called. I call them delicious. Right, I've had them at game banquets, and they're once you get over that mental block of what it is and try it, it's wow. I've had a bunch of people, first timers at game banquets, and said, no, give it a try. You'll really like it. And they're always converted, and they go, holy crap, that's not what I thought it was.
I'll share your sentiment. Yeah, white meat, and it's really I like it. We've served at Jurassic a few times, and yeah, fascinating. I really enjoy it, actually. So
yeah.
Anyway, episode 59 with Siobhan Darlington. Enjoy, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
If you looked up the words conservation superhero in the dictionary, you would see a picture of our friend Omer from Precision Optics. A tireless donor and supporter of all things wild sheep, Precision Optics, located in Quesnel, British Columbia, truly stands alone in the high alpine. From optics to rifles to outdoor gear and a knowledge that cannot be surpassed, toss in that killer smile and you have a total conservation package. Precision Optics, we are truly thankful for the support you show us every step of the way. Find them online at precisionoptics.net or in Aroma Foods, located just off Highway 97 in Quesnel, BC.
Good morning, Siobhan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle, for having me on today. I appreciate it.
So you're zooming in or squatting in from the interior, I understand, of British Columbia?
Yes, I'm based in Kelowna. Based at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan.
Okay, very cool. So where are you at in your, you're working on your master's, your PhD? I think it's your PhD now that you're working on. Is that correct, Siobhan? Or?
Yes, so I'm just over 2 years into my PhD research at UBCO. So I started in January 2020.
Very cool. So now let's just back up the bus and kind of let's talk about a young Siobhan, where you came from, how you ended up. I know you're not from BC, and I'm really curious to hear about a typical day in the life of Siobhan, because chasing cougars around the bush sounds pretty exciting. But I'm guessing you're not doing that 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But anyway, let's go back to your early days, where you grew up, and kind of your interest, I guess, in wildlife, really.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm from Nova Scotia. I think I have a bit of a mesh between a Nova Scotia and a British Columbia accent at this point in my life. But yeah, I'm from Halifax, so I grew up there, and I went to university at Dalhousie for my undergraduate degree in biology. So I had an interest in the environment from a young age. I had a teacher, Madame Shelley, when I was a kid, who taught us all about recycling and composting and caring about the environment. And that really struck a chord with me when I was 11. And I didn't always know I wanted to work with wildlife, but I really had a passion for my pet cat. And I loved going to zoos and other things to do with animals. So I think it kind of naturally came for me at the point in university that I wanted to study wildlife conservation. So at the beginning, it was more an interest in the environment, and then building towards, I really care about animals and how we can protect their environment. So not just our environment, but the environment we share with wildlife. So I did my undergraduate degree there, and yeah, decided to pursue my career from that point.
What was your undergraduate in? Sorry, I missed that at the start.
I was in biology and environmental sustainability. So it was kind of funny. I thought I was going to be this hippie riding a bicycle, studying government policy and sustainability and be all artsy. And I discovered in my undergrad that I really enjoy the sciences and natural sciences a lot more. So I started steering more towards conservation as opposed to the more government side of things. And now I'm coming full circle a little bit more around policy later in my career.
Very cool. So you did your grad there, and then where did you go after there in terms of schooling? You did your master's in out west here? Or?
Yeah, so after my undergraduate degree, it's tough to find a job in the environment in Nova Scotia. So I worked just after my undergraduate degree an internship with the Nature Conservancy of Canada in New Brunswick. So I moved there as their conservation volunteers coordinator, and just did an internship coordinating events across the maritime provinces and getting locals to engage with the environment and protect it by planting trees and building trails on protected lands, surveying for birds and insects and that sort of thing. But I learned in that position that I really wanted to do more field work. So I enjoyed working with local communities, but it was a minor aspect of my job was getting outside. Most of it was desk work. So I learned that I really wanted to do more science and pursued my master's at the University of Victoria. So I ended up moving across the country to the other coast. And I picked Victoria because it's most similar to Halifax, and that was a big move to do by myself. So I was brave, and I packed up all my things on my own and went to UVic, and haven't looked back since. I've been in BC and a bit in Alberta ever since 2015. And I pursued my work with Dr. Jason Fisher and John Volpe studying whitetail deer in northeastern Alberta. So I was lucky I got to work in Victoria, but my research was in northern Alberta and I didn't have to live there.
So can we just touch a little bit on that? So your whitetail deer study, was a lot of it classroom oriented or like working from the home office, or was there lots on the ground doing collar work and that sort of stuff and being out there on the ground involved with that? What did that look like for you?
So good question. So I came on after the collaring had already been done. So the collaring occurred in 2012 through 2014. So 38 deer does were fitted with GPS collars. And I came on in 2016, starting on that project at UVic. So I was mainly doing the analysis with the collar data. However, we did also have a camera grid with 62 remote cameras deployed on the landscape. And I was able to go out to Christina Lake and Conklin and service the trail cameras. So I did get to see the study area, and I did see deer, and I even saw caribou when I was there. So part of my research was investigating not only deer movement and habitat use in the Conklin area where there's a lot of heavy industrial disturbance, but the implications of having deer on that landscape for woodland caribou that are in decline.
Cool. So I got a ton of questions around that, but we're kind of doing the chronology of Siobhan. So I'm going to continue on with that, but we'll come back and touch on that stuff. So, okay. So now you really recently released your first person paper. I think, was that how you called it? First
authored.
First authored. Okay. Right. So that means, and I'm not a scientist, so, but that's, your name's the first one. So you're kind of the lead. Is that my correct understanding on that?
Yeah, so it's a collaboration, but it was primarily me who did the analyses and writing and all of that, but with help from all of the other authors as well.
Cool. So now, was that paper relating to the whitetail study, or was that an independent study?
So this is related to my master's research, yes. So okay. It took a few years to get the analyses just the way we wanted. I had already finished my thesis in 2018, and you know how life gets. You get busy doing other research projects and things get on the back burner, but I'm glad that that paper's finally out. But yeah, so that was part of my research at UVic.
Well, congratulations on getting that first paper out, and yeah, that's really exciting. And we'll touch on that more in a few minutes here. So you completed your master's in 2018, and then talk us through the PhD and what's going on with that and how that's worked.
Sure. So I finished my master's in 2018. I did actually do a stint in Alberta before starting my PhD. So I worked for FRI Research based in Hinton, working on whitetail deer there and caribou, also doing a bit of modeling for grizzly bear and caribou around mountain pine beetle and natural causes of landscape disturbance. So they have massive problems in the Jasper Hinton area with mountain pine beetle. And there's really not a lot of research that's been done on how caribou and grizzly bear, both species at risk in Alberta, respond to mass swaths of mountain pine beetle taking out forest cover and changing lichen composition and that sort of thing. So I worked there doing some modeling for that and catching deer. So I did get to collar and trap whitetail deer finally doing that project. And my interest in cougars really came, I had a bit of an interest in cougars before that because I studied the predators of deer in northeastern Alberta, but we didn't have cougars coming in to our cameras or anything like that really in Lac La Biche. But when I was in Hinton, we had cougars on our cameras coming into our deer traps. So I was checking the cameras we put up on the clover traps, and we had cougars coming in, and like their tracks in the snow were all inside the traps, and they weren't getting stuck in there. We had them locked open during this cold spell, but there were photos of cougar kittens playing on top of the trap, and I thought, whoa, that's crazy. And the best part was when I checked the pictures, this all happened seconds before I walked up. So I walked up to check the camera and flipped through the photos, and less than a minute before I showed up, the cougars were there. So I thought, oh my gosh, I almost saw a cougar. That's crazy. I've never seen one before, and I can't believe they're probably close to me, watching me right now. So I really wanted to pursue something on cougars and deer, and that's what led me to applying for this PhD that I'm doing now in British Columbia. Is that appeal was there already for me between the two species.
Cool. So talk us through that. So my understanding, UBC Okanagan, I seen Dr. Adam Ford. I think you're part of working under him, and maybe another doctor as well. So tell us about that evolution and how you got involved. Obviously, we know the interest part of it, but how did you come to be in the Okanagan?
Yeah, so Dr. Karen Hodges and Dr. Adam Ford were approached by TJ Goliath at the Flynn Row in Penticton, the Ministry of Forests, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Ministry of Alphabet Soup.
Yeah. And so he had an idea to do some cougar work in the Okanagan. He did his master's on lynx and bobcat with Dr. Karen Hodges. So there was an interest in big cats for him, and thought, hey, I think there's a knowledge gap here with cougars. We had this mule deer study already underway. Why don't we build on it by doing something with cougars? So they came together and advertised to hire a student. And I saw that advertisement and applied right away. I was very excited about that. Especially the opportunity to work hands-on collaring cougars and being involved with every aspect of the study. So it hadn't started yet. There was like no funding, nothing in place, just an idea really. And by the time I came on, they had purchased the collars, and the project was starting to develop in terms of our objectives. And I really had the opportunity to help out getting grant funding, starting from scratch, and yeah, going through all the stages of putting together this huge collaboration.
Yeah, TJ's great. We helped him out. I'm in Prince George, and with his lynx bobcat, there was a trail camera picture that was up for debate. People said, "Oh, it's a bobcat in Prince George," and yeah, worked pretty closely with him. Yeah, good guy.
Very cool, Siobhan. So let's harken back, I guess, to your master's work and your project there, and the paper that you recently released, and maybe just give us an overview of what that paper was about. It's very interesting. I think I know it's an Alberta study and it's around deer. A lot of our listeners are sheep centric, but I think probably aspects of that paper relate to disturbances in northern British Columbia and how they've affected the caribou and possibly some sheep as well. So, and predator management and predator involvement and that sort of thing. So yeah, if you don't mind talking about that, I'd love to hear. I've read your paper and really enjoyed it actually. But there's a lot I didn't understand as well. So I'd love to hear it from your mouth, I guess. So.
Sure. Yeah. So for this paper, we were really interested in understanding what the drivers are of white-tailed deer habitat use in northern Alberta. So to back up a bit, white-tailed deer have been expanding the limits of their northern range for 50, 60 years in Canada, moving further north in Alberta through northern British Columbia into the southern Yukon. And there was a study in 2014 and 2016 out of the University of Alberta looking at whether land use change from development or climate change were kind of the causal factors of deer moving north. So that was a really interesting study that looked at this, and they found that climate change was the main driver. But what they didn't do in that study was really analyze land use in more detail. So all the different types of disturbances, like legacy seismic lines that are cause huge amounts of deforestation and create this grid and sight lines for predators. And we know from other studies too that predators like wolves are using those features to navigate faster and farther through the landscape to target their prey. So if a wolf can see really far away down a seismic line that's totally clear, what chance do prey have in that environment? It's very difficult for them to find anywhere to evade predators. So that study didn't look in too much of the weeds of the different types of disturbances. So we really wanted to look at that side of things, because it's interesting that deer occur really intensively in big numbers in these areas that are heavily developed by industry. But their population numbers aren't consistent if it's just climate driven across the country. So we're not seeing in neighboring Saskatchewan, where there's less development, on the other side of the border at the same latitude as many deer. So there has to be a combination of factors that's creating the suitable environment for deer to thrive in the winter. So why are they, successful in the winter? They must have a lot of access to food. Their population's been able to grow and occupy that landscape year after year, even after a severe winter. So we wanted to look at things like deforestation from clear cuts and seismic lines, roads, and all of these factors to see, well, which ones are important for deer and which ones aren't. Is there anything deterring deer from living here? Or are we just making this a deer's paradise? Making really good food, forage, access for deer. And, there's not enough hunters in the area that can limit this population. It's very difficult, as you probably know, to control deer numbers when they get out of hand.
Now, just out of curiosity, is there a scenario where white-tailed deer will start competing with caribou in northern climates? That's a factor. Is that something that was on the radar? Obviously, that wasn't the focus of your study, but is something that you came across in the work that you were doing?
Yeah, so what we call that, we refer to this as a parent competition, is when the number of one prey indirectly affects another prey species negatively through a shared predator. So if the deer populations in northeastern Alberta are climbing and they're this basically buffet of deer on the landscape for wolves and bears, that means that they can support higher predator numbers. So this is how they negatively impact caribou. So there are a couple caribou ranges that overlap our study: the Cold Lake caribou and Athabasca East caribou herds. So we saw on our trail cameras in our study very few detections for caribou. They're heavily in decline. They do fairly well in the Cold Lake range because there's a military base where they're essentially protected from development. And we see that in other military bases elsewhere in the country where there's more mature stands, better food, that sort of thing, more protected from predators or industrial disturbance. But anywhere outside of that range, caribou are in this landscape covered by disturbance and huge sight lines. And predators, we saw lots of wolf tracks, coyote tracks when we were up there. I did see caribou when I was putting out the cameras as well. So I was really lucky. I saw them my first day at the very first camera I went to service, which was right by the Cold Lake Range, just on the border. And drove down this road with a huge transmission line along the side. So I got these epic photos of caribou standing in the middle of the road, and it's just all disturbance around them. So that was really, it hit home for me that what we're doing to these landscapes impacts wildlife. And here we are with these dwindling caribou that we almost never see. And they're standing here in this really risky spot in the middle of a road where any predator could easily see them. So that was really interesting. I didn't study direct predation of caribou from wolves or anything like that in this study. It was focused on deer, but the implications for caribou are there. If we have a habitat that sustains deer, that's bad news for caribou. But I do know that they did have, so after our study, there were wolf culls that occurred in the area. And there's another student at UVic who is completing her master's, Katie Bailey David, on the pre and post wolf call distribution of some of these animals with the camera data. So you'll have to wait for her paper to come out to see what the impact of wolf reductions might have had on caribou and deer as well. But during my study, there were still pretty high wolf numbers as far as we know.
Very cool. So now with your paper and your study and your master's as well, what impact will that provide to, regional biologists in the ministry in Alberta, or, I guess in BC if they use that data? What will that allow them? What kind of things could they use that for? Would it go around land use planning, things like that, or would it be about the wildlife management? Just curious what the primary drivers would be for that paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a couple things we can take away from this work. So one is that deer are in the eastern part of the range, and where we are in this study near Lac La Biche and Conklin, is that deer use roadside verges. They use areas that are clear cut and have regenerating plant growth. So anywhere where you're cutting forests and providing new food for deer, you're helping those deer stay in the area and use the landscape, and that's benefiting them. So a lot of focus for caribou conservation has been to slow down predators, so direct removal of predators, and also restoring seismic lines and making seismic lines difficult for wolves to travel down. So that's been a focus of conservation, but we haven't really been looking at it in the lens of prey that sustain wolves too. So thinking about what features support deer. It's not just about seismic lines for wolves. What about all the other features that benefit deer and they're a detriment to caribou? So clear cuts that don't provide the lichens that caribou eat. So that's not good habitat for caribou, but it is good habitat for deer. So thinking about how cut blocks are managed, how roadside verges are managed, roads that are deactivated, no longer used, they take a long time to regenerate too. So thinking about road management and land use planning that way, and just trying to reverse some of the negative effects of, building roads constantly in this landscape. And if you see it from a bird's eye view, it's really something to see, is how many seismic lines and roads and cut blocks there are in the boreal forest up there. And it's no surprise that that's a huge factor in affecting these wildlife interactions between predator and prey. So really thinking about how we can restore this habitat, not just for caribou, but limiting it for deer, because deer didn't used to be there. So we can look to the future in other caribou range further and further north as deer continue to move forward, at the northern extent of their range. How can we get ahead of this so that it's not a huge problem, hopefully in the future, for other caribou herds?
Mm-hmm. And then, I guess in southern BC, and I guess central in some capacity, they're competing. Mule deer competing as well, right? Because whitetail just seem to be such a resilient species, and they just are able to, grow and grow and grow and increase their range. So are we seeing decreasing? And I think mule deer numbers in British Columbia are down, from my understanding. Is that at the hands of whitetails, or not? Was that part of your study at all as well?
So it wasn't part of my study for my master's, but it is something that I'm looking at in my PhD, because we are looking at mule deer populations in decline in the southern interior, and white-tailed deer are a factor in part of that range. So we do see some whitetails where we are here in the Okanagan. There are fewer whitetails than mule deer. We don't know how many exactly of each, but it's evident that they're not as established here as in the Kootenays, for example. So when we were looking at my PhD research in cougar predation, we can see what prey are available to cougars, and it's very clear that white-tailed deer are far outnumber mule deer in the Kootenays as cougar prey. But in our other study areas, as you move further west, we get equal numbers approximately in the boundary between Rock Creek and Grand Forks. And then in the Okanagan, mule deer far outnumber whitetails as the prey source for cougars. So we can see how we have fewer mule deer in the Kootenays, and that might be because whitetail are established there now and might be out competing them there. So I'm not an expert on mule deer. You'll have to ask Chloe Wright, a PhD student studying mule deer. She knows this a lot better than I do. But I think that's certainly a factor.
Cool. And forgive me for going off on these shoots. I know there's your core that, and again, I read the paper, so I should know better, but these are always intriguing questions. So let's go back to your study and the core of that. You talked about industry disturbances and seismic lines and cut blocks. How about climate change? How much of a factor? I know that's one of the components you looked at. Can you talk a little bit about climate change and how that affected whitetail populations as well?
Yeah, so we know from other studies that deer populations are limited by severe winters. So if they can't access food, there's too much snow. Snow depth is hard to move through deep snow if you're a deer. The northern limits or deep deep snow depths and stuff like that. So climate change is certainly a factor in terms of more mild winters occurring in the north. So as fewer and fewer severe winters occur, the landscape is more suitable for deer. We didn't look at climate change specifically in this study. We were focused more on land use change and the human side of things that's more directly impacting the landscape rather than indirect human effects. However, we did look at seasonal effects in white-tailed deer, and we found that their habitat use didn't change a lot between the seasons. There were some differences and a few different features here and there, but overall, deer were still using a lot of human land use features in winter as much as in summer. So we know that even though there might be milder winter, a lot of these other land use features are playing a role year round. So in the fall, they're able to use cut blocks. In the winter, they can still benefit from cut blocks in some areas. So there's still that forage is still there for them to access, and we're just opening that landscape up for them. So we're not seeing a huge drop off in deer numbers in the winter. So that's part of it as well. So you would expect that if there's really hard winters, deer numbers would decline and then potentially rebound. But with fewer severe winters, we're not seeing that drop off of deer as much anymore. So that's where climate change can be an impact here, is that it's not limiting the population as much as it used to.
Okay, so Siobhan, earlier you referenced pine beetle, and I think this maybe is part of the climate change piece in the sense that winters aren't as severe, so the pine beetle aren't as affected.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit how pine beetle and what impact that has had on your study in the whitetails as well?
Yeah, so I didn't look at mountain pine beetle in the Lac Les Biches area. This was with my work at FRI around caribou and grizzly bears. But what we did find there is that the mountain pine beetle outbreaks in Western Alberta are really out of control because if there's fewer severe winters, the pine beetle can still proliferate and very quickly. If you go to Jasper in the last few years, the whole park is covered in mountain pine beetle infestation. It's everywhere, and we're seeing caribou in decline, very much so in that area. So Moline Lake caribou herd is extirpated. The Tonquin, I think, is the only one that might be still viable there. Some of the other herds are dwindling, and then outside of the park as well, Narroway herd and Little Smoky are hugely impacted by land use disturbance from industrial activity. So by removing forest cover from mountain pine beetle infestation on top of all the deforestation happening in their range, we're really seeing a huge reduction in canopy cover. So once the needles fall on these trees from mountain pine beetle, there goes this canopy that you need for the lichens that they rely on. So you need some mature forests for caribou, and these mature forests are getting wiped out by pine beetle infestations. So it seems caribou are getting hit left, right, and center with all these different disturbance types, natural and human caused as well.
Yeah, I know driving east into Jasper from Prince George, it's just as soon as you start to crest over the hill, it's nothing but seas of red, and it's brutal. When I first moved up to PG about 15 years ago, it used to be the same, and they've done some selective logging up here and kind of mitigated that problem. But as you say, the canopy's gone. They can't plant fast enough. The trees and the cover doesn't. They don't grow fast enough. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from on the beetle over there. It's just ridiculous.
Cool. Okay, so let's segue. There's tons to talk about there, but let's segue to your current work and your PhD study. So you're currently involved in the Southern BC Cougar Project, and I know you had a goal of 50 collars, I believe it was. So can you just give us an overview on what you're studying, the program itself, and then I've got a million questions for you about all kinds of stuff. So.
Sure. So the Southern BC Cougar Project is a collaborative project with the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, Flenro, the Okanagan Nation Alliance. There are many different partner organizations supporting this work. So I just want to acknowledge everybody that's been a part of that project. We really couldn't do all of this without so many volunteers and supportive groups and local game club chapters and such. So yeah, just getting that out there. Thank you to everybody. So the objectives of that project are to build off of Chloe Wright's PhD research, analyzing mule deer proximate mortality across the southern interior and the causes of decline. So what she was observing in her study so far is that the proximate cause of mule deer mortality is cougar predation. So our study is building off of that to analyze where cougars are killing their prey. How many cougars are there even? Because we don't know how many cougars there are in the interior and whether density might be an issue or not. Looking at their movement in the landscape and how they use disturbance types. So Chloe is looking at mule deer response to wildfire. And we know that in BC, we're getting increasingly intensive fires. And we just had a really big fire season just this last year. So what we want to know is whether fire is not just a good thing for deer or not. Is it important for cougars? So can cougars use disturbed landscapes from wildfires or clear cutting to hunt their prey more effectively, or is it drawing them to certain features because they might be producing food for ungulates? So we want to understand kind of the multiple levels of how disturbance types on the landscape affect predators and their prey. So we're looking at cougars, where they're occurring. We've collared 36 individuals so far, and our target is 40. So we're almost there. We're hoping to get our last 4 collars out this winter, and then we're hoping to continue to replace some collars and maintain our sample size over the next few years.
Cool. And the duration of this project, like if you get the 40 on, and then how long does it continue to, and when will your paper come out on this potentially?
Yeah, so isn't that the question every PhD loves to be asked? Every PhD student, when are you going to be done?
Yeah.
So we're 2 years in now. We're hoping that we'll finish the collaring this year, and it'll really just be some maintenance. Whether the project continues beyond 2 more years from now will be up to my advisors probably and our funders, whether they want to continue supporting the project and potentially have another student come on board. As much as I love cougars, I probably couldn't stay forever as much as I want to study cougars all the time. But I am hoping to begin my analysis. So we've done a lot of field work so far on the study. We've collared the 36 animals. And we've also been visiting cougar kill sites. So we've had technicians for 3 seasons now collecting data on what cougars are eating throughout the winter, spring, summer, and fall. And we also have volunteers helping with that as well, and the Okanagan Nation Alliance technicians. So we're hoping that we can continue the kill site investigations at least through the end of this summer coming up, and then use that data in my analysis in the next year. And then after that, I'll start writing. So probably a couple of years for my paper, but we're definitely getting close. We have the bulk of our data collected now. Which is exciting. And we've done, I think, about 900 cluster sites, which is the grouping of GPS locations where we think a kill could be for a cougar. They're not always a kill, but we've done 900 of those sites, and about 62% of those we find a carcass that a cougar was feeding on.
Very cool. So let's just maybe just talk cougars in general, and then we'll jump into the specifics of the study. But let's just talk about historic range for some of our listeners. I think, I'm sure you're familiar with this book, Path of the Puma, by Jim Williams. Are you familiar with his work at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually met Jim a couple months ago, and he signed my copy of Path of the Puma. So thank you, Jim. Shout out to you.
Yeah, this is a great book. I was actually on a northern BC wolf hunt last year, and I was reading this book, and I just it was fascinating. I couldn't put it down when I was sitting in a ground blind. But anyway, some really interesting work there, and he talks about the historic range. And I know you've done a good job of articulating that too. So run for our listeners the historic range and kind of what's happened to cougar numbers over the years, and then kind of where we're at today, I guess, if you don't mind, Siobhan, please.
Yeah, sure. So some of you may or may not know that cougars used to occur all across North America. So they're limited today to the western side of North America. They run from the southern Yukon in pretty low numbers, but they occur from the southern Yukon all the way down to Patagonia. So they're the widest ranging terrestrial mammal, I believe, in the Americas, because they occur in so many different countries. They have over 50 different names because they occur in so many different places. But they only occur in North America from, Vancouver Island, approximately further west, over to the Dakotas. So there have been some small remnant populations in the Dakota Badlands of cougars breeding there, and in the last 10 years also in southwestern Saskatchewan, where in the Cypress Hills they discovered a population of breeding cougars. But that was only in the last 10 years that population was discovered. So they have been observed moving further east. There's also a remnant population of Florida panther. So they're isolated and genetically distinct from the other cougars in the rest of North America because they've been separated for so many years. But they're also, they're further east, but they're the only population that exists on that eastern side of North America. So there are sometimes dispersing cougars that move from these areas like the Badlands or Alberta into places like Manitoba and potentially even Northern Ontario, but there's not sustained populations in those places just yet. But they did occur even in Nova Scotia, 150 years ago or so. We had cougars there. We also had caribou. So it's really hard to imagine where I'm from that there used to be cougars and there were even caribou in Cape Breton. Historically speaking, not that long ago. But what happened to cougars, among other predators, are that they were heavily persecuted in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And it was only really until the 1960s that cougar management became a thing. So in the US, certain states started implementing management plans to keep some cougars around. And this shows really how resilient cougars were, because there were bounties on cougars. 100 years ago, you could make a lot of money hunting cougars to get rid of them. So it was really only in the 1960s and 70s that states and provinces started to put regulations in place for cougar hunting and keeping them around. So we've seen them, start to recolonize the areas where they were essentially removed 100 years ago. So that's been really cool to observe and read about. And what I'm also interested in seeing is whether or not cougars might also be moving further north, similar to whitetail deer. So we don't know a lot about how they might be shifting with climate change. There's a lot of unanswered questions around cougar distribution moving forward.
Cool. So now, if we're just to dumb it down, what are historic cougar numbers? If their all-time high, and then current number estimates for worldwide, I guess, effectively, or North America, if you will.
I think today, and you can't perfectly quote me on this because the estimates for cougar are so variable between provinces and countries, and it's really difficult to survey cougars, one, because they're so elusive. They're really difficult to detect on cameras, even to determine how many there are, and not many places have current density estimates. However, I think there's the ICUN has something like 50,000 cougars across their range, and Canada has just under a quarter of the global population, most of which are in British Columbia. There's a lower percentage in Alberta because the range is mainly in the Rockies and the foothills of Alberta, and not so much on the eastern side. So I think in British Columbia, estimates are very variable between, maybe 4,000 cougars or something like that, 5,000 cougars. But what the answer is, we really don't know how many cougars there are. And especially further north, there are some other cougar projects starting up with the government in the Chilcotin, looking at cougar numbers. There's some interest and momentum looking at cougars in other places in British Columbia right now, which is exciting. I think our project has really gotten other people to think about their role and how many there are, and hey, maybe we should be paying attention to these animals. But we're learning that there are places in northern BC where they've never done a cougar survey before, and there's very limited data on hunter harvest in some areas as well. The hunter harvest data is very useful for us in terms of seeing how far they've been documented from conflict or harvest. But in terms of wild cougars that never see people and the evade hunting, we don't have any data on that in many places.
Right. So just so roughly 50,000. And what was the historic high, like, estimated? Do you have any number, just out of curiosity? It would have been obviously significantly higher, I would imagine.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know exactly how much it is, so I can't really say. Back in the day, they also didn't have nearly the technology that we do today to estimate accurately. So even if there is an estimate, it probably isn't really very close to what there really were on the landscape back in the 1800s or so. But you can imagine more than half of the US and Canada being wiped out, how many that would be potentially. But with human development too, I mean, pushing cougars further and further away, and more conflict, removing cougars coming into where people are, has been a huge factor as well.
Okay, cool. All right. So now back to your study. So with your work, talk us through a normal day. And I know there's probably nothing normal about it, because and also I'm very aware that the project's, getting towards the end of the like on the ground work, and you're getting your last callers out. So it's evolving now. But what's a typical day for Siobhan Darlington? What does that look like for you, and what you're doing?
Well, the exciting part about my work is that day to day, it's really different. So I have many days where I'm working on the computer, organizing people and the data, and looking at where we need to collect more cougar data. I'm looking at maps of cougars. Every day I check where the locations are for each cougar, and I look at how many sites we've done for each one. So it involves a lot of mapping and looking at data throughout the day. But you never know when you can get a call on this project. So sometimes I get a phone call, it's 5:00 and I'm about to sit down to dinner, and the conservation officers might have a cougar that I could call her and translocate. So, hey, I gotta go grab my truck and all this equipment and head out, and it's getting late, and now move a cougar before it gets dark. So that sort of thing. Sometimes we have a mortality signal come in. We had 2 cougars die on the project in the last week. And one was in the Kootenay study area and one was in our boundary study area. So one was from snaring and the other one was from predation by another cougar. So I get these mortality alerts on my phone and I have to figure out whether or not it's true, because sometimes the cougars fall asleep. Same thing happens with deer or other collared animals. They go to bed and the collar is not moving for a certain number of hours and it tricks you into thinking it's a mortality signal. Right. So usually I wait and see. I make sure that it's not moving before we drive 3 hours to go check it out. But organizing all of that too. So you never know day to day what could happen, or if another houndsperson or hunter might be seeing a collared cougar and we need to go replace the battery for that cougar. So now we're rushing to go meet a hunter in the backcountry, on no notice. So I always joke with people who want to come out with them. Can you still hear me?
You bet.
Oh, I just logged out for some reason. My computer signed me out. Sorry, one sec.
No worries.
I can't believe I'm still on.
Yeah.
My computer just went completely black for a second.
Oh, it went to sleep. That's happened before. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, we've had some of them run out of battery too, so we got to wait for a charging cable. So.
I did plug mine in. Okay,
yeah, you're good.
So what was I saying?
Your day.
Yeah, so I do tell people who want to come out with me to do cougar work that I never know how long the day is going to be, because oftentimes the work is we work at all through the day, and then sometimes we're snowmobiling in the pitch black back to our trucks. It's the days usually are a lot longer than you think in the winter. We don't have a lot of daylight to work with, and our sites are very far away. Cougars live far from towns, healthy in the backcountry. It takes a long time to get there. And it's very physically demanding. So cougars live in mountainous areas in deep snow, and there's not always a road to get you very close to the sites. So you need snowshoes and a snowmobile and all this, and sometimes the equipment doesn't work for you. And anyway, so I come back usually with a lot of bruises, pretty tired, and my days are pretty long. But then the next day I might just be in the office for the next few days. So it's very variable, but it's exciting. I think that the work keeps me on my toes. And most people who want to come out with me, they don't ask to come out again when they experience one day of cougar
Once
field
is
work.
enough. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So do you try and go on every single mortality, every one? Like, are you on those, or is there some where you just can't make it and you have someone go in your behest?
Yeah, so if they're in the study area in the West Okanagan or the boundary, either myself or our hired technicians will go and investigate using the telemetry equipment and track down the collar. But in the Kootenays, since that study area is a 6-hour drive, we have partners over there with Pat Stent, a senior wildlife biologist at that office, and he has some partner technicians with the Nature Trust of British Columbia. They're helping us out. So it won't always be me investigating, but people who do go out for us will collect as much data as possible on cougar mortalities. We haven't had too many. I think we've had 7 or 8 total since we started. So it's not quite the same as mule deer that die all the time. On Chloe's study, she'll go out and collar the fawns in the spring when they drop, and then over half of her fawns have been predated, within a couple weeks. So we don't have quite as many mortality signals as the ungulate people do.
So when one of these things I see on Facebook all the time is you see a picture on somebody's trail camera or of a cougar that's got a collar on it, and people always come unglued and say you're choking it, it's in pain. So can you talk a little bit about what a collar is, what it's made of, and how it's sized, and does it fall off or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So the collars that we use, they are the most advanced collars that are available, the ones that we're using. They're made with leather, so the leather belt is there and it has what's called a rod-off strip. So the rot-off strip is just made of material that degrades over time. And the collars are not meant to be on the animals for life, and they degrade. And we've checked a few, we've replaced a couple batteries on collars and checked the rot-off, and it works pretty well. We've even had a few collars fall off cougars so far on the project when we've gone and collected them. So they're not on the cougars for life, but we fit them so that we can fit 4 fingers or so and slide them underneath. So they can't get a whole paw under the collar. That's really important. So it's the same thing with hoofed animals. You don't want them to get a hoof caught under the collar. So I think a lot of people who are looking at collared animals think that's too tight, not realizing that if you make it too loose, 1, it could fall over the top of their head. 2, they could get a paw or a hoof actually caught in a collar that's too loose, and then they can't get it out. So it's more dangerous to make a collar too loose, which is really, the fit is very important. We're very careful about that. They also have 2 compartments on carnivore collars. So on ungulate collars, there's 1 compartment. On cougars, there's 2, 1 for the battery, 1 for the computer. But the collar itself doesn't weigh very much. So it's less than, I think, 3% of the body weight of a cougar. So it looks heavier than it is. It weighs virtually nothing. So they design these collars to be as light as possible while being durable enough to withstand, a cougar going around in the backcountry in all weather conditions, taking down a moose, right? So they have to be durable enough that we can still get that data. But one thing I like to emphasize too is that we can get so much data from a single GPS collar on a cougar. We have learned so much about what they eat. We'd never find the food that they eat without the collar data. We also learn about where females den and give birth, how many kittens they have, whether they're male and female, how long the kittens live for. There's an abundance of information that we can learn from one single collar. So it's a small sacrifice to make to learn about this elusive species, because the alternative is to have virtually no data on them.
Very cool. Yeah. So talk us through. So you obviously, it's way too early to analyze the data, but I know you've been watching these things and you have preliminary, things that you're learning. Talk a little bit about, I guess, the importance of, collaring a cat. I know kill sites are a big part of this, and then mortality and what's really impactful. And you kind of touched on it there, but let's go a little bit more into detail on the importance of the kill site. And I know. And maybe talk about the process. I know you got the trail cams up now and stuff, and that work is fascinating to me as well. I was blown away by some of your footage. So over to you on that stuff, Siobhan.
Yeah, so what we're learning with the kill site investigations really comes down to cougar diet. And what's interesting is we don't know a lot about what cougars eat throughout the year. Many cougar studies out there have looked at cougar diet in North America, and it's mainly during the winter. There was a study in Alberta that was led by Kyle Knopf, and he looked at cougar diet throughout the year and found, hey, they were eating a lot of deer in the summer, more so than in the winter. And we find that in other studies, cougars tend to diversify their diet. So they eat more different animal species in the summer than in the winter when they focus more on deer. So we wanted to know, is British Columbia's southern interior more similar to what this study found in Alberta, or is it more similar to other places like Wyoming and Montana where they've studied cougars? Are cougars eating more different things, or are they eating even more mule deer in the summer than they do in the winter? And we're looking at different aspects of this. So looking at, like I mentioned before, the role of landscape disturbance. So wildfires in the summer, does that mean that cougars are honing in on deer in areas that have been recently burned and producing lots of plants for deer to forage on? We're also looking at the role of scavengers. So that's why we have cameras up on cougar kills. So we're looking at the role of other animals on the landscape, not just cougars, that rely on mule deer carcasses. So we've got tons of black bear footage coming into these cougar kills and stealing away cougars' food in the summer. So anytime black bears are out, we're getting black bears on all of our cameras. Same thing with coyotes. Looking at the interactions between those animals and thinking about whether or not that has any does it translate to cougars eating more deer because their food is being stolen all the time? Or does it have no impact because the cougar's done eating anyway and they move on when they choose to? So we're looking to see if black bears might be pushing cougars off their meal and making them kill even more mule deer. Is that why cougars are eating more mule deer than they might otherwise be? So looking at the whole ecosystem is really important. So not just cougars and deer, but all the other animals that they share the landscape with and compete for access to mule deer with. So we're looking to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, not just the cougar piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that makes, I was absolutely fascinated by that. Oh, did we lose you?
I can hear you.
No, it's still there.
Okay, so I was just saying that I was absolutely fascinated by the kill site information, and just how many animals were frequenting the site, and for long after the carcass is completely been processed as well. Like there's nothing left, but there was so much activity there. So very interesting. So now, when you have a mortality, first of all, how many cats have you lost since the study of your subject animals?
I think it's 7 or 8 now. I have to go back to my. We said 2, so I have to think about what our total was at, but it's not very many. And the different causes have been a couple from hunter harvest, but other reasons as well. So the one that we had most recently was from conflict with another cougar. So another cougar killed our female and consumed her. I actually skinned out the skull and everything, and I found the puncture marks of the cougar's lower canines into the back of our cougar's skull. And the upper canine teeth marks were all across the back of the head. So you could see how she had been attacked and punctured. And she also had a broken jaw, and she had puncture lines around her nose as well. So we could piece together the evidence to show that, hey, this cougar was killed by another cougar. I don't know if it was a female or a very young male. All I know is that the puncture marks line up with the size of a mature female. But it could be a young male that's around the same size. So that's been really interesting. Other causes, we had one recently that was caught in a trap or snare. Another that was possibly poisoned. It was inconclusive, but there were traces of poison in the system. Another one was human livestock conflict. So we had a cougar that was found on someone's property, and they believed the cougar was going after their livestock. So we are picking up and documenting many different causes of cougar mortality. There are a few we haven't documented yet. Like we haven't had any vehicle strikes yet, but in other places that's known to be a pretty big cause of cougar mortality. So we're also looking at road crossings for cougars to see what the risk is there too. Although we haven't detected that mortality cause just yet.
Interesting. Now, with regards to, I think there was one case of infanticide as well. Am I correct in that? I think I read that in one of your studies.
Yes, we actually had another one too. So we've had one collared cougar that when we went to go investigate what it was eating, it was a kitten. And then we've had some of our tagged kittens consumed by predators as well. And it's hard to tell when something really small is eaten by a predator, which one it was, especially in the summer when there's no tracks that you can see, fewer evidence to look at. But we do believe that some of our kittens born on the study were predated by male cougars, as other occurrences of infanticide.
Interesting. So now, one of the things I was going to ask you about with regards to was you mentioned a number of items in their diet, and it sounds like by far deer is the biggest in the Okanagan study and the boundary, as well as the Kootenay study. Is that correct?
In the Kootenays, we have mostly whitetail deer and elk, and lower numbers of mule deer. In the West Okanagan, it's mainly mule deer and then moose, with only a couple whitetail and I think one elk.
Okay. And did you mention there was one bighorn sheep mortality, or that was?
Yeah. So we were hoping to detect more sheep on our study. We haven't had any goats, and the only instance we've had so far bighorn sheep being predated was, interestingly, a collared bighorn sheep sent a mortality signal from this canyon on the east side of the valley. So I went to go check it out because one of our collared cougars had been right where that sheep was at the same time and the same day. So we went to go see if our cougar had in fact killed this collared deer or collared sheep. So I hiked in with Andrew Walker down into a canyon and found this ram predated, but interestingly, there was no sign of cougar predation. It was all bear evidence. So there were piles and piles of bear scat, bear beds, flattened vegetation, everything about it said bear. There was nothing about it that said cougar. So we had to go back to the data and look at it again. And it looked like what happened was our cougar possibly predated this sheep. It's hard to tell because there was no other sign by the time we got there. But we think she may have attacked this sheep and then immediately lost it to scavenging bears. So her data showed that she had been in the canyon at the same time that the sheep died, but immediately afterwards, within a couple hours, she was up on the ridge above it. And it looked like she was hanging out, possibly observing these bears eat her food, and then she left. So if we had gone to the cougar's data, we never would have found the sheep dead because her data was all piled on the ridge, not in the canyon. So it's interesting that we detected this event through the collared sheep because we never would have found it otherwise. And that's the only time we've seen those two species interact from our cougar perspective.
Well, it's interesting, and I'll just touch a little bit on this. And I know this isn't necessarily what your study is targeting per se, but I'd like to touch a little bit on it. There was a 1997 study in Alberta. I think Ian Ross published the paper around bighorn mortality at the hands of cougar. And it's really interesting that there was. They talk about the high mortality rates, but you're not seeing that in the Okanagan, which is interesting, or in the Kootenays for that matter. But I guess. Is it because there's not a high population of sheep there, you think? Or because interesting, I one of the stats I've seen that 9% of one bighorn sheep population in Alberta and 26% of the lambs were killed by one female. So I found that very interesting. And I actually thought your study would show more bighorns in the Okanagan region and the Kootenay region than what we've seen. So just curious of your thoughts on something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the factors in our study is that we don't have too many cougars that do overlap with bighorn sheep range. So we have, I think, 3 cougars that overlap substantially with bighorn sheep, and we haven't found any sheep at their kill sites so far. However, we only just collared one of them. So for the most of the studies so far, we haven't had very many cougars overlap with sheep. So I think that's part of it. Our one cougar on the east side of the valley where this event with the ram occurred, this cougar has been in a wildfire restricted area because of the big fires on the east side in the summer. So it's possible that cougar has eaten sheep and we haven't been able to access that side of the valley because of the restrictions to see what she's been eating. So it's possible that we just, because of these reasons, aren't detecting the bighorn predation that we might expect. But we are hoping that once we get our last few callers out, hopefully we'll have some more cougar activity overlapping with sheep to be able to look at this better. Maybe target some areas where sheep occur if we can. We can't always choose where we'd find a cougar, but we can do our best. But another thing too is that cougars tend to eat the prey that overlap in their range. So as long as there's food available, cougars will eat any animal that they come across that they can successfully predate. So any cougars, and there's been some studies in other places like on mines in Alberta, led by Megan Beal, where they had a couple of cougars that overlapped bighorn sheep herds on a mine, for instance. And that's mainly the food that they ate because that's mainly the food that was there in the range. They overlapped mainly sheep and there weren't too many other animals around to eat. So when you see specialization like that, sometimes it means a cougar has just established there because there's a food source. And if there were other deer and things around, they probably eat some of those too based on availability. And some specialization has been observed, but it's really rare and not always easy to prove that they're specifically targeting a certain species because they just like it better rather than that's just what's around where they live. And
right.
cougar, sorry, go ahead.
Basically a target-rich environment. So it's not that if they were deer there, they'd be eating deer. If they were elk, they'd eat elk.
Yeah, exactly. So they tend to be a generalist predator. So they'll eat whatever is food where they live.
So often I hear from hunters, "Oh, kill every cat you see or whatever because they're going to kill all the sheep." I guess if there's a high percentage of cats in a specific area that there could be increased mortality for bighorn sheep in a bighorn sheep area, or sheep in general, maybe thin horns as well. But so generally, that's not the consensus. What's kind of the argument? I know Jim Williams, in his book, he worked very closely with the houndsman, and he was very careful. He tried to educate hunters that, cats aren't necessarily the evil that everyone perceives them to be. That, yeah, there may be high predation, but if you have a very balanced area and you have a cougar with a wide range, that they're not going to have an overly high, kill rate on sheep. Is my understanding? Am I correct on that, or am I out to lunch on it?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And the other thing too to think about is that if we remove and target cougars for removal too, and this has been tried in a few places for bighorn sheep and for mule deer, species that are in decline, to remove a bunch of cougars, and hopefully that'll protect that vulnerable prey species from predation. It doesn't always work that way. So cougars defend territories very strongly against other cougars, especially males. So if you remove cougars from an area where there's sheep predation, you might be inviting more young cougars in who will feast on them. So it's really hard to keep them at bay if you're continually removing them. So it's not always the best answer, because if you remove an established cougar who's been defending that territory for years, you might have some dispersing young males that aren't familiar with what prey's there, and they could just see a bunch of sheep and go for it. So it might end up making things worse for sheep by trying to get rid of all the cougars in the area, because there is some social behavioral stuff at play here with cougars, and the boundaries of their territory, and the things that they know where to hunt deer certain times of year. They know where to hunt sheep if they want sheep. They're familiar with the range. So yeah, it's not always the solution that you think it is.
Yeah, unintended consequences and the ever moving, balance of one thing affects another, and sometimes it has unintended consequences. So interesting. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I know there's tons more on your study and a bunch of other stuff I'd like to touch on. Obviously, we know we're going to get this great paper coming down the road. Now, I know you've touched before in other talks about the provincial cougar management plan. I'm guessing a lot of your work will influence that. And do you know any timelines that the government has on this new management plan? Have you heard? I don't know much about it. But I'm curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we are hoping that the Southern BC Cougar Project will help inform this plan. We are also working with Flinroe currently in the West Okanagan to do a density estimate using biopsy sampling for cougars to better evaluate how many cougars there are in the area. And that will help the provincial management plan in terms of assessing how many cougars are here in the first place. And also our data will help contribute to things like cougar survival. What is the average age class for cougars in this part of the province? What are the causes of mortality? Are there habitat use, issues around cougars and their prey, that sort of thing? I don't know the timelines. It's government, so it's hard to say when some of these big documents are coming forward. I'm hoping that our work in the next 2 years will inform it. And I hope it won't come out too soon, because I'd like our results to be a part of it and, have more impact that way for our study. So I'm hopeful that, hopefully a few years after we're wrapped up here, that provincial management plan will come forward using not just our cougar project data, but like I say, some of these other projects in the Chilcotin, looking at cougars and caribou. They can help inform this provincial-wide plan as well. So it won't just be based on our study, but other places too. So yeah, I'm hopeful that it'll come out hopefully in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in terms of hunters and backcountry users, if they have a cougar experience, and I guess in your 3 subject areas that we talked about, or your 3 study areas, is there something they can do? Is it helpful if you get any data from people in the backcountry that experience a cougar, or they see a kill or something like that, a kill site? Is there something they can do to help you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple things. If you did find a cougar kill in any of our 3 study areas, you can contact me. I do have a data sheet, and we do have volunteers that will fill them out. Whether they're from a collared cougar or not, it's still informative for our study if you determine that it is a cougar kill. Even if it's a mule deer mortality and it's killed by something else that may be of interest to Chloe. So it is helpful to document different causes of mortality for the two species in these study areas. If people do find fresh cougar tracks or see a cougar or have one on their camera, a lot of people have trail cameras out in the backcountry and might get a collared cougar. Please let us know. So there sometimes our callers don't connect all the time with satellite, and we might not get an update for a cougar in a while. So sometimes we've had people email us pictures of a collared cougar, and we'll look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's C8. We haven't seen her in 2 months. Perfect. They have a coordinate. We can go and try to get her collar fixed up. So anything like that is really helpful for us in the study areas. If you have information outside the study areas and it's interesting, I just like to see it anyway, even if I can't use it. I love to see people's footage from their cameras and hear about their experiences.
Cool. So if someone wants to reach out, how do they get a hold of you, Siobhan?
Would be bccougarproject@gmail.com is our email. We also have a website, is www.bccougarproject.weebly.com. And you can check out our blog posts, media, podcasts. I'll post a link to this podcast too. You can listen to it again and read about our project updates as well. We send out updates twice a year and post them on our website so people can learn what we're finding and new updates on how to volunteer as well.
Cool. That awesome. Really, really fascinating study. Love following your stuff, and just, anyone that's listening, we'll post the links here. There's just so much interesting footage and data and information, and you've done some very cool webinars. So appreciate all the work you've done there, and look forward to getting that paper. And once you get it, share it with us, and we'll have you back on and learn about all your findings.
Amazing. Thank you too for having me on today. I really appreciate it. And I hope I've inspired a few people to, look into cougars. Just learn lots about them. They're not as scary as you think. They have very interesting behaviors, and they're all around us. So it's good to learn about their role in our environment.
One last question. I think this is Ranella, ask Steve Ranella. They always debate the name of the cougar. So what's your favorite cougar name?
My favorite name?
Yeah, there's 50, right?
Yeah, at least. I don't know. I think Mountain Screamer is a good one, or Ghost Cat. I think those are fun.
I've heard Ghost Cat before.
Yeah, Ghost Cat. But yeah, if you ever hear the call of a cougar, it is really eerie. So I like Mountain Screamer because I feel like it really encompasses their presence in the mountains and the sound that they make. So it's pretty cool.
That's screech. Yeah. You hear it once, you know it.
Very cool. Mountain Screamer. Love it. Thanks again, Siobhan, and appreciate your time.
Amazing. Thank you.